Okay, here we go. It's time for another Doctor Who review. Today we're going to go boom! And boom! It's time for another Steven Moffat episode. Here we go. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. It's time then to review episode 3 of the latest series of Doctor Who. Sunday evenings when I'm reviewing it. I didn't not review it last night for any other reason than it just wasn't convenient for me to do it last night, and I was out and about today. It's no reflection on Steven Moffat that I'm late doing this review, although maybe it's a reflection on the episode. Now, just to set up my stall, for me, reviewing a Steven Moffat Doctor Who episode's a bit of a minefield. See what I did there? Because I'm not his biggest fan as far as Doctor Who is concerned, and it's very difficult because he is often regarded as one of the great towering geniuses of Doctor Who. The best writer of Doctor Who, the best writer Doctor Who's ever had, and that's a position that I clearly don't agree with. If you've ever read any of the pieces I wrote for Starburst back in the day, I've got nothing against him as a man. He's a very nice person. I've met him a couple of times. Very pleasant man. I just don't agree with his view of what Doctor Who is. His view of what the Doctor is, who the Doctor is, what the Doctor does, and the types of stories that he should be involved with. When he started writing for the show back in the early 2000s, when the show came back, I quite enjoyed The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances, Girl in the Fireplace, Blink, Silence in the Library. But even at that point, I thought, yeah, there's a lot of ideas here that he keeps going back to. The idea of people not dying. The idea of malfunctioning technology that's trying to help people but is actually doing bad things. Or misunderstood creatures, aliens that were misunderstood because of communication problems. These things that sort of came around quite a lot in his version of Doctor Who. I think only the Weeping Angels didn't fall into that trap because they had a proper malevolence about them. But I think the Weeping Angels really were a one-trick pony. I think that every time they've appeared since Blink, their power has been a little bit diminished. Although controversially, I'm going to say that I think Chris Chibnall made a good fist of them in Village of the Angels back in the Flux series a couple of years ago. But when it came to Steven Moffat show running Doctor Who, I think it was a bit of a disaster. For me personally, I know a lot of people love it. I know a lot of people really invested in Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, Amy and Rory, who I could barely tolerate, to be honest. The mysterious, enigmatic Clara, bloody River Song turning up all the time. I just didn't buy into those characters and the stories because I think Steven Moffat became so enamoured of the fact that the fans put him on this pedestal. He tried to be cleverer than he needed to be. So instead of telling a straightforward Doctor Who story with a few flourishes here and there, he sort of tried to outdo himself to impress his fans. And I do think that's very much how it was for Steven Moffat. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole again because I've done it too often, and I know that people get annoyed. I'm sure I'll get some comments here. But I just think that his Doctor Who stories very often weren't stories at all. They were just odd, random ideas that very often just reflected things he'd done in the past. He was there for 6 years, and if anybody was going to kill off my love of Doctor Who, it was Steven Moffat, because by the end of his run, I was exhausted, and I was just running on empty in terms of appreciation of Doctor Who, because I wasn't getting much out of it. I think he fumbled Peter Capaldi badly, let him down with some bad storylines that are, again, another poor interpretation of what the Doctor is. Not Peter Capaldi's fault. But anyway, that was all in the past. I've gone on for about 4 minutes now about Steven Moffat's previous history of Doctor Who. He's back. It was always going to happen. He was always going to come back. He denied he was coming back when it was announced that Russell was coming back, but I know that they're thick as thieves. They're fans of each other's work. He was obviously going to come back. And I sort of hoped that over the intervening period since he's been on Doctor Who, he would have had a few new ideas and inspiration would have come to him about doing something a bit different. But boom to me. I wasn't a massive fan of the episode. I enjoyed it. It was sort of entertained me for 45 minutes. But as it went on, more and more of its tropes and reused ideas just came back again. And it felt, I mean, this is an episode, because it was another chamber piece episode. It felt like you could have put Peter Capaldi and either of his companions, Clara or Bill, in this. It had that feeling about it. The dialogue. It didn't feel like Ncuti Gatwa's dialogue. It didn't feel like Millie Gibson's dialogue. It felt like Steven Moffat's generic, quippy Doctor and companion dialogue. It didn't suit these two. The story then, obviously, is that the Doctor and Ruby land on a planet which appears to be in a war zone. The Doctor runs out because he said somebody in distress. In a pre-credits sequence, we've seen a couple of soldiers, one temporarily blind, being led across the battlefield and being wiped out by this robotic thing called Ambulance, played by Susan Twist, who's making another one of her regular appearances this season. The Doctor rushes rather stupidly and ill-advisedly across this war zone and puts his foot on a landmine. And the rest of the episode basically is about him getting off the landmine. Now, the idea with this episode was to demonstrate some real tension in Doctor Who. I think Moffat and Russell T Davies have said Doctor Who doesn't do tension. Take a look at Midnight from the 2008 series. That's tension for you. The tension in this is superficial, because we know the Doctor's not going to get blown up. We know that his companion's not going to be blown up. We're just marking time until we find out how he manages to get his foot off this mine. But in getting there, we get all the Moffat tropes again. I mean, the whole idea of the story isn't original anyway, because he's admitted that it was lifted from, or inspired by, if you prefer, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. It was inspired by a very brief sequence in part 1 of Genesis the Daleks back in 1975, when Tom Baker's Doctor, arriving on Skaro during a war, puts his foot on a landmine and his companion Harry Sullivan helps him out. So that was a brief moment in 1975 Doctor Who story. Now that's stretched out across 45 minutes. And then we get familiar Moffat ideas. I mean, we get the cleric soldiers, which we had in season 5, these religious soldiers, and themes of anti-religion and anti-capitalism that are fairly unsubtly threaded throughout the episode. We get artificial intelligences that on the blink, very reminiscent of things from Silence in the Library. And in the end, we even had a reference to bloody fish fingers and custard. So there's nothing new here. It felt like Moffat's greatest hits, and I was disappointed because I was looking forward to it, and I wanted to take, well, he's delivered a really cracking episode now for this new run. He's really invigorated himself in the way that Russell T Davies has, whether you like the episodes he's done so far or not. Every episode that Russell's done since he came back has been different, and it's gone in new directions. And there's, I know a lot of people complain about the Disneyfication of it and the wackiness of Space Babies and things like that, but Space Babies and Devil's Chord were totally different episodes, as the specials last year were different episodes. But this just felt like Steven Moffat pressing the button and all his old ideas came out and he just reassembled them in a slightly different pattern. Now, I didn't dislike it. As I said, it entertained me, but it was very much a Steven Moffat episode. It was 4 or 5 characters in a crater talking for 45 minutes. Because Steven Moffat doesn't do action in Doctor Who. He's really not very good at those fast-paced sequences that the show is built on these days. It's very much about people standing, talking, wisecracking, being clever. And I just find that tiresome. And in the end, I found it tiresome in this episode, but it's quite clear that all we're going to get was this. In terms of the visuals, I mean, there was a lot of talk before the episode was screened about how it brought to life this incredible alien landscape thanks to the volume, this American back projection-y type thing, which is in popular use at the moment. I didn't feel they made a great use of it here, to be honest, because this was something that could have been done in a quarry, and I understand that it was very nearly done in a quarry in Anglesey, but it didn't feel, again, I'm feeling this for this era Doctor Who. It's got a lot of Disney money, but I'm still not seeing it on the screen. I mean, yes, the visuals are great, the planetary, the skyscape was fantastic, but it didn't look like anything that the show hasn't been able to do in the last few years. And I'm sorry, I keep on saying, much as people have a go at the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who, it looked beautiful and the scale was extraordinary. Some of those episodes during Flux, for all its faults, they look big, they look huge, they look cinematic, and I don't really get this from this era yet. It looks great, and it was all done in studio in a controlled environment, but I did feel like that. I didn't feel like they were on another planet. And of course you had no proper villains again another Moffat conceit. So it was all, I felt I'd seen all this before, to be honest. And yes, it was emotional, it did those things that Moffat likes to do with his stories, but I'm a bit sort of over that. And just leaves me a bit cold, because I know that I've seen this before in so many of his stories. So that was Boom. I mean, I will say again, great performances from Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. They are great. They rise above the material. No, I don't want too many comments going, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to get them anyway. But I think it's just basically, it's not for me. Steven Moffat's writing for Doctor Who isn't for me. It is for a lot of people, and I'm glad a lot of people really enjoyed this episode, because there's so much negativity about the series at the moment online, and I have been a bit swamped by it lately. It's nice to see that people are saying this is the best episode in years, the best episode ever. It's neither of those things, but it's a good solid episode. But I don't think there's much rewatchability in it, because I think once you've absorbed the tension of it and you know how it resolves, there isn't anything to it really. There's nothing visual. You wouldn't think, I want to go back and see this bit, or I want to go back and see that bit, because it's all pretty much a chamber piece, a stage play. That's my thoughts anyway. I'm sure you'll all disagree, and I expect to be thoroughly vilified for this review, but I can only tell it like it is. For me, I'm not a fan of Steven Moffat's Doctor Who. This hasn't changed my opinion. I didn't hate it. I hated a lot of his episodes when he was a showrunner. I can name you things like Let's Kill Hitler, the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, the terrible one he did at the end of Peter Capaldi's time when there was no story. Lots of things that just meandered and wandered, which were, I thought, terrible episodes. This wasn't terrible. This is just a Steven Moffat episode that was very much like other Steven Moffat episodes, because it had all those same ideas. So I'm disappointed that he didn't pull something out of the hat new and just sort of went back into what he did before. But that's him. That's how he sees Doctor Who. That's how he writes Doctor Who. Some people love it, some people don't, and I'm one of the ones who don't. So that's Boom. I'm afraid, yeah, it didn't work for me as well as it should have done. But I did, as I said, it did entertain me. There were some decent moments in it, but I'm glad he's not back permanently. I know he's doing the Christmas episode, which has dulled my excitement for that slightly. But that's just me. That's the cross I have to bear. I'm not a Steven Moffat fan. Right, I'm going to give it... I'm going to give it 6 out of 10. Despite everything I've said, I think it was decently made, and the acting was good, and the effects good. I just want something a bit bigger from Doctor Who now, rather than this sort of thing, which is very intimate. So there we are. That's Boom. Next week we've got the episode I'm really looking forward to, 43 Yards, I think it's called, which is, Russell T Davies has said, is one of the best things ever written. Welsh folk horror story. The trailer looks good. Looking forward to it very much. I'm not going to talk about ratings here, because you will be aware of the ratings for this episode. I may do a piece later in the week when the final ratings for the first 2 episodes have arrived, because I think it's still too early to tell what direction we're going in terms of how successful this era is. It very much depends on those catch-up figures. However, I will point out that thank you very much for everybody, about 1,600 people who viewed my previous ratings in perspective video, which I put up last week. Very amused by some of the comments. I had to do a filter in the end, because I did say don't be abusive, don't post stupid comments, post constructive things. And I had a lot of comments where people saying, and this is something new I've come across, I've never heard of this before, this is cope, this is copium, this is epic cope. And I looked this up. This is a new thing, apparently, a slang expression that's come along, a modern expression to describe people who are making excuses for some bad news. Coping. And I got a lot of that, which I found very amusing. It's almost as if 10 people had suddenly found this expression and decided to throw it onto my channel. Of course, I deleted it all straight away, because it's nonsense. It's not coping. It's just putting it into perspective. But of course, these comments come from people who've got this agenda. They want to destroy Doctor Who and they want it to die, which I don't think it will. Anyway, more on the ratings probably later this week. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't be too unhappy with me because I didn't like Boom. It's a matter of taste. Just not, it's just not for me. But I didn't dislike it, as you'll see from the mark I gave it. So don't throw stones. Leave those comments down below. Let me know what you thought of it. But if you're abusive, and if you're stupid, and if you say it's crap, or even if you say it's crap, I'm not interested in that. I want to know what you liked about it, or what you didn't like about it. R.I.P. Doctor Who. It's better than RTD crap. Not interested. Be constructive. Be sensible. Right, I'm out of here. See you soon until I do. You keep taking the stuff.